I grew up knowing my parents never really saw me, but it wasn't until my cousin moved in that I finally understood how invisible I truly was. The moment he walked through the door with his perfect smile and carefully rehearsed politeness, they acted like the universe had gifted them a replacement child. He became their pride, their joy, their miracle, their golden boy, while I was reduced to a background character they barely acknowledged. Every compliment that used to come my way now belonged to him. Every effort I made suddenly looked small beside the pedestal they built for him overnight. For months, I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, but the shift was too sharp to ignore. I'd bring home good grades, and they'd nod distractedly while praising him for achievements that didn't even exist. They bragged about courses he pretended to take, internships he never applied to, and responsibilities he never lifted a finger to fulfill. Meanwhile, I picked up his chores, absorbed his messes, and took the blame for things he cleverly twisted into my fault. He'd smirk whenever their backs were turned, whispering subtle digs that made my stomach twist because I knew no one would believe me if I repeated them. The more I tried to keep my distance, the more he inserted himself into every part of my life. He monitored who I talked to, what I did, and where I went, like he needed to establish dominance in a house that wasn't even his. I caught him sneaking alcohol into the bathroom one night and overheard him bragging on the phone about fooling my parents. I even saw him flirting with the neighbor's married daughter while pretending to be some misunderstood genius. When I confronted him, he only smiled and dared me to say something, knowing exactly how it would play out. I did tell them. I told them calmly, clearly, and without anger. I laid out everything I'd seen and heard. And just like he predicted, they turned on me instantly. They called me jealous, insecure, obsessed with dragging him down. My father accused me of trying to ruin the peace of the house. My mother cried like I had personally attacked her by speaking the truth. The golden boy watched silently with that smug look, the one that told me he'd already won. The punishment came the next morning. They suspended my schooling, temporarily, they claimed, until I apologized to him for lying and humiliating family. They actually wanted me to kneel and beg forgiveness from someone who had manipulated them so thoroughly they couldn't even see past their own delusion. When I refused, they cut my privileges, restricted my movements, and treated me like I was the threat. All because their favorite didn't like being exposed. I didn't apologize. Not then, not afterward, not even when the pressure became unbearable. Something inside me hardened. Something inside me warned that this boy wasn't just their favorite, he was dangerous. And if I backed down now, he'd own every part of my life. That fear, that anger, and that growing sense of isolation became the start of everything that followed. Being stuck at home while everyone treated him like a saint made every hour feel heavier. Without school to escape to, I saw everything they refused to see. I noticed the way he slipped out late at night, returning with the same rehearsed innocence that fooled them every time. I'd hear him whisper in the hallway about money he promised someone, only to later watch my mother panic over missing cash. I tried pointing it out again, but they shut me down before I even finished a sentence. They insisted I was creating stories because I couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Their loyalty to him was blinding, and he knew how to use it. Isolation does strange things to you. When your home becomes a cage, you start searching for cracks in the walls just to breathe. I found that crack unexpectedly in someone who shouldn't have mattered so much. A quiet neighbor, older, calm, someone who had already sensed something off about my cousin long before I said anything. He'd seen the flirting, the late-night messages his wife tried to hide, the smug grin she couldn't explain. When he asked if everything was okay on my side of the fence, it felt like someone had finally noticed the truth I'd been screaming. Talking to him wasn't planned. It started with short exchanges, simple check-ins, nothing personal. But when he mentioned his suspicions about my cousin, I felt a rush of relief I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't imagining things. Someone else saw it. Someone else believed me. One conversation turned into another. I found myself standing a little longer, speaking a little softer, letting my guard down without realizing I was doing it. I didn't intend to create a connection, yet the bond grew naturally, fueled by mutual frustration, shared betrayal, and that dangerous comfort of finally being understood. Back inside, things escalated. My cousin stole a watch my father treasured, hid it under my mattress, and pretended to find it while helping me clean. My parents didn't even question him. Their disappointment hit me harder than any punishment they gave. They were ready to see me as a thief before accepting that their golden boy could do anything wrong. Anger rotted inside me, mixing with loneliness until I didn't know what emotion I was even fighting anymore. The more they punished me, the more I drifted toward the one person who listened. Every conversation pulled me in deeper, making me feel safe in a way that should have terrified me but didn't. He wasn't romantic at first, he was simply the only person who treated me like I mattered. But emotional closeness has a way of crossing lines when everything else in your life is falling apart. I started depending on his messages, his reassurance, his voice telling me I wasn't crazy. He became my escape from the chaos waiting inside my own home. And even though I didn't fully understand it yet, the path I was stepping onto was already shaping itself into something irreversible, something that would later blow open every lie, every illusion, and every fragile boundary I thought I could control. The night everything cracked open began with another round of accusations I didn't deserve. My parents cornered me again, convinced by another one of his carefully planted lies. He claimed I'd been sneaking out to meet someone suspicious, twisting my desperation for air into something shameful. They lectured me for an hour, their voices stacking blame on top of exhaustion until I felt like I was suffocating. When I finally escaped outside, I wasn't looking for anyone, I just needed space, but he found me before I fully regained control of my breathing. He didn't ask questions right away. He simply stood beside me, letting me speak at my own pace, letting the silence settle between us with a strange gentleness that felt foreign compared to the chaos I'd left behind. When I did talk, everything poured out, every accusation, every unfair punishment, every moment of being dismissed. He listened without judgment, and something inside me cracked under the weight of finally feeling heard. Comfort from someone who wasn't family shouldn't have felt this intense, but in that moment, I clung to it like I had nothing else left. What started as emotional release shifted into something more charged when he reached for my hand. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't forced. It was instinct, two people bruised by betrayal leaning into each other for warmth neither of us had at home. I should have pulled back. I knew I should have. But the loneliness made his touch feel like the only solid thing in my life. When he whispered that I deserved better than being treated like a problem, it shook me more than any lecture my parents had thrown at me. I had spent months feeling worthless, unheard, constantly blamed. Hearing the opposite from someone who had every reason to keep things distant hit dangerously deep. The moment escalated quietly, slipping from comfort to intimacy without either of us fully noticing the line we crossed. A kiss happened before I even processed it, a soft collision fed by pain, not desire, by longing for validation, not recklessness. I told myself it was a one-time lapse, something born from emotional overload, but the truth settled quickly, I didn't want to step away from him. For the first time in months, I felt chosen. I felt believed. I felt seen. What I didn't know was that my cousin had followed me outside. He stood far enough away to hide but close enough to catch every second. Instead of confronting me, he slipped back into the house with the kind of smile that promised disaster. He didn't care about morals or loyalty, he cared about power. Catching me in something he could twist into ammunition gave him leverage he'd been waiting for. I kept meeting the man who comforted me, thinking our connection was secret, fragile, and protected. I convinced myself no one would ever find out, that I could manage this small slice of control in a life where everything else had been stolen from me. But every step deeper tied a tighter knot around the truth waiting to explode. My cousin watched from the shadows, collecting proof, piecing together a weapon he would unleash at the exact moment he could cause the most destruction. And I didn't see it coming, not even when the ground beneath my feet was already beginning to split. The explosion happened exactly the way he wanted, loud, humiliating, and impossible to defend against. My cousin waited until the house was full of relatives, until every judgmental voice had an audience, until my parents were so proud of him that they wouldn't hesitate to believe whatever he said next. He dropped my secret like it was a casual comment, like he was doing everyone a favor by exposing the truth. He painted me as reckless, immoral, ungrateful, and dishonest, twisting every vulnerable moment I'd confided in someone else into something filthy. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had already decided the verdict and knew the judge and jury were on his side. The room turned on me instantly. My mother gasped like she'd been stabbed. My father demanded answers he didn't actually want. Relatives whispered harsh words disguised as concern. No one asked why. No one asked how months of neglect pushed me toward someone who simply listened. They didn't want context. They wanted a villain. And my cousin stood there watching me take blame for choices he had engineered, smiling like he'd just won a lifelong competition I never agreed to enter. The man I had grown close to stepped forward, trying to take responsibility for his part, but that only fueled the chaos. Accusations flew at him with the same force they threw at me. His marriage shattered on the spot, and my parents blamed me for that too, insisting my behavior ruined multiple families. They refused to acknowledge that their beloved golden boy had been the one chasing the man's wife from the beginning. Every time someone pointed out his involvement, he deflected with practiced innocence, turning suspicion into sympathy. My parents shielded him like he was fragile while I stood there stripped of any dignity they once pretended I had. But the truth has a way of leaking through cracks people try to patch over. A week passed before the lies he built began collapsing. The neighbor's wife confessed that my cousin had been pursuing her for months. Phone records surfaced. Messages he sent her were discovered. Someone he owed money to showed up at our door demanding repayment. Bit by bit, the image he crafted started tearing, revealing the manipulative fraud beneath it. My parents tried to hold on to denial, but reality piled too high to ignore. Their golden boy had been playing them all along, using their blind loyalty as a shield. By the time they realized how deeply he'd betrayed them, the damage to me was already done. The apology they offered felt hollow, rushed, and more like an attempt to ease their guilt than to acknowledge mine. I didn't accept it. I packed a bag the same night and left, not dramatically, not with anger, just with the quiet certainty that staying would finish breaking me. I went to a relative who actually listened, someone who didn't treat me like a threat or a failure. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I didn't excuse my mistakes, but I finally understood they didn't define me. What defined me was the strength it took to walk away from people who chose illusion over truth. I didn't return to that house. And I didn't apologize, not then, not ever again.